Good afternoon, sports fans. Here we are, the AD Vantage Point, brought to you by the NYSPHSAA, New York State Athletic Administrators Association. And the topic of conversation today is part two of, where are the officials going? Why are officials leaving the field? And last week we had on 3 officials from Suffolk County, and they brought up some great points. We're going to reiterate some of those points today that they brought up. But we also have some additional friends with us today. So I'll introduce the officials in a minute. But right now I want to go around the room and just introduce who's here. They can say a little bit about themselves and bring us up to speed on the whole package here. So we're going to start with Dave Gardi.
So thanks for having me. My name is Dave Gardi. I work at the National Football League offices in New York. Been there for almost 20 years. I work in football operations. I'm the senior vice president of football operations. So I work a lot with our officiating department, worked with them for many, many years. And I'm also here probably as a father of high school athletes in Long Island and want to help. I kind of reached out to Marc to say, what can I do from our standpoint, from my personal standpoint, and the NFL, what can we do to help? Because we realize there's some things happening. Folks aren't coming into the officiating ranks. And obviously at the NFL level, we get about 5 to 10 new officials a year. We're getting them from the college conferences, but we care about the pipeline starting in youth sports and high school sports. So whatever I can do, whatever part I can do, whatever I can offer, I'm here to hopefully help.
We're so glad to have you, Dave. We're honored to have you, as a matter of fact, today. Coming to us from Green Bay, Wisconsin. I think you said today, right? You're out of Lambeau today?
Yes.
Great. Our next guest is Associate Executive Director from New York State Public High School Athletic Association, Todd Nelson. How you doing, Todd?
Great, Jim. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Todd Nelson. I'm the Assistant Director with the New York State Public High School Athletic Association, starting my 15th year here. I have various responsibilities within the association, but one of them is working with the officials. And as many of you know, we are in a critical situation with our officials, and our association is looking at ways that we can try to address this situation and increase the number of officials we have, but also, probably more importantly, retain the officials that we already have. So they go hand in hand with each other, and I'm interested to hear the thoughts and positions that people have today, and hopefully we can address this together.
I appreciate you having Todd. I mean, we're coming off of a big meeting upstate, and maybe Todd, you could bring us up to speed on what happened up there when we get to you after the introductions.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
Our next guest is Matt Lauria. Matt.
Hey, thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me on. My name is Matt Lauria. I am going into my 10th season as the varsity lacrosse coach at Walt Whitman High School. I've been involved in lacrosse all my life. So I'm just here to give some perspective from a coach's standpoint on the topics we're going to discuss today.
And Matt, you also played Division II lacrosse for Dowling when they were national champs, right? So you have that perspective as well.
I did, yes, and a brief stint with the New York Lizards.
How brief was that?
It was a season.
Okay, I'll take it. That's brief enough. And our last new guest is a good friend of mine. And unfortunately, one of the people that's going to be on the firing grid here because of his position as a parent and spectator. And that's my good friend, Rob Maichin. Rob, how you doing?
Good, Jimmy. Thanks for having me. My name is Rob Maichin. I am officially an empty nester as of 2 months ago. I have 2 children that went through the Huntington High School program for both basketball and lacrosse, and they're both off and on their way to playing college at this time. So happy to be here and hope to bring a good perspective from the parents' angle.
He's the one guy that's, it's in the stands. Out of all of us here, all of us stand on the field with our backs to you guys. So now you get to tell us what goes on in the stands. We think we know, but we're not really sure yet. We'll figure it out though. And then of course, my 3 friends from the officiating crews in Suffolk County, from the Suffolk County Football Officials Association, Marc Negrin and Carl Superina. How are you doing, guys?
Very well, thanks, Jim.
Having us again.
And also from the Suffolk County Lacrosse Officials Association, I got it right this week, Marty Quinn.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me. Look forward to it.
Good. Okay, so let's get it right off the plate because, Rob, we're going to put you right on the spot right away.
All right.
according to surveys, according to people out there, the thing, everybody that's in every meeting or every discussion about officials and the lack of officials at contests point to the parents and say, you're the problem. And, obviously we're not pointing at you, Rob, you were never a problem to anybody. It's, you were the guy that stayed away. But why are parents the problem to so many of, and there's a lot more than just parents, just don't get me wrong, but I want to hit this one right away. So why are parents the problem?
From my perspective,
From your perspective, yeah.
I'll be honest, I think a big part of it is because so many of the parents today played. And because they played, they have this idea or this ownership mentality that they know better. And, I, growing up as a kid, my parents didn't play. You didn't hear much when I was a kid playing from the parents. So I think because so many of them are so vested in their kids, their game, because they played the game, and also because so many of them have aspirations that go beyond, the youth and the high school level, that it's all about the ability to succeed, that I think parents take it to another level.
No question about it. And again, if anybody wants to comment on anything that's said here, just raise your hand up. I can see you. When we do this on the video, it shows one by one. But isn't that something that we talked about last week, Mark, Carl, Marty?
Yeah, I'll go first. I'm sure my partners will have something to add as well, but you're right. It's the parents are invested in their children and they want them to have the best opportunities for success. And going to that point, if they were athletes in their high school and college days, the game has changed. The way things had being done has changed. It's now an air of entitlement in everything that's done. Back in the day, as a student athlete, and I know that Matt was a student athlete, we never questioned or even thought about questioning what the coach said. We would never go home and tell our parents, because the last thing we wanted to have happen is for our parents to call the coach or to call the AD or to make a comment to the superintendent. It's totally changed now. Now they don't even go to the coach. They go right to the AD or the superintendent to make their complaints. And they just don't understand the chain of command, number one. And it really starts in their living room. Parents sit down with the child and make them understand the expectations as a student athlete. What is your responsibility? What is the coach's responsibility? And remember that the coach is a teacher on the grass. He's not in the classroom. He's on the grass. It's the same level of respect. It's the same level of obedience that you find in the classroom. And that whole concept is gone.
I want to jump to Dave real quick, and because of something you just brought up about this. So Dave, the NFL has trouble getting officials now. You said a little earlier, right?
We don't necessarily have trouble because we're bringing people from the college ranks. So our problem isn't pulling great officials from the Big Ten, ACC. It's thinking about where we're going to be 15, 20 years from now, which is what you guys are all talking about.
Right. So you're not going to see that problem there, because we're not going to worry about the parent of a professional athlete yelling at an official during a game. And
look, I'm a parent of a high school athlete, and now he's playing at Marist College. So I'm in the stands. I'm like Rob. I've been in stands at Garden City High School football games and now Marist College football games. And it is very difficult for me when I write a lot of the rules in the NFL. I work on the rule book every year and realize how little our parents know about our playing rules. Not to mention what you guys have already talked about, the fact that they played sports when they were younger.
So now I'm gonna kind of jump through to Todd. And Todd, we've identified this. We identified this throughout New York State, that it is that parent issue. Are you in agreement about the points that Mark is making and that Rob is making about the situation with parents?
Well, I think, with the expansion of youth sports, and when people pay money to, have their students participate in sports, I think they get a lot more say in what goes on in sports, whether it's from the coaching aspect, whether it's from the officiating aspect, whether it's what tournaments they're going to go to. And then that entitles them to feel like when they get to the interscholastic portion of their son or their daughter's participation, they just carry that right over. And that's not what interscholastic athletics is about. We're vastly different than the youth or club sports method that's out there. And I think that's part of the problem, is that they feel like they're entitled because that's the way it's always been when they were growing up, and no one held them in check, especially when it comes to the officials and their behavior. And I think it's our responsibility as member schools of a state athletic association to say that's not the expectation. And if you're not going to meet our expectation, then you don't need to be there supporting your son and daughter. I mean, that's a privilege. It's not a right for you to be there. And that's what I think we need to get back to, is setting the tone at the interscholastic level, in my opinion.
Exactly. And I think everybody's nodding their heads here as you're speaking, Todd. I know you can't see them, but everybody's nodding their heads in the same vein. And now I think about the communication aspect of this. So as an athletic director, a former athletic director, I would think to communicate it, but really the first time that we come in contact with an official prior to the season is that preseason coaches meeting. So Marty and Carl and Mark are those guys. So what is it that you guys are saying, Marty, Carl, Mark, and we'll start with Marty. When you get to that first coaches meeting in the preseason, maybe talk about rules. Do you bring these things up about parents and about control?
We do. So every year we meet, I meet with the Coach Association with our interpreter and any other board members. And the one thing that we have asked them over the last number of years is, guys, please talk to your junior high coaching staff, and please, talk to your ADs. We need better security at the junior high games, and, not to diminish or not to put a leash on the junior high coaches, but please, guys, talk to these guys. And if they can be more professional or just not as vitriol when it comes to arguing or going over calls. So we have asked that of them at the junior high level, because as we discussed last week, we're getting decent numbers into our class, but retention is the biggest issue that we're facing. Individuals are coming, they're becoming officials, but they're leaving it within 1 or 2 years.
Carl?
Yeah, and like basically with the parents, right? From the coaches, I'm sorry, let me get back to the coaches level, right? When we meet with the coaches, we stress with them the importance of sportsmanship towards the officials, right? How they treat us, right? How the parents treat us, and we try to give them guidelines, right, of what they should do or shouldn't do. So, and it all boils down, like Marty said, the junior high level, right? That's where you see the most contentious, right, parents, right? Because they're so close to the sidelines, right, that they're right on top of you. And again, those are our junior officials, right? And if they're going to take that abuse at that level to themselves, they're thinking, well, what's going to happen when I get to JV or varsity? How bad is it going to be?
So, exactly, great points. But you brought up the really good thing about dealing with the junior high level. Matt, you're not only the varsity coach, but you're also a travel coach.
Yes, that's right.
So the dynamic is different. So when we know when you have your coaches meetings, you talk to the parents and you mention the same things the officials are mentioning. But what about from the travel point? Because I know what we're going to get to. We're going to get to the point where travel is causing all our problems right now. So what's it like as a travel coach in dealing with parents and dealing with those types of situations?
So I played travel back when I was younger. So I've been involved in travel lacrosse for 22, 23 years so far as a player and as a coach. From when I started to now, it has drastically changed. Parents, when I played, you had your 1 or 2 parents that were a little vocal here and there. But as the years went on and the pressure to have their son or daughter stand out in the game and have a bad call made against them or whatever it is, it's not their child's fault. It is the official's fault. So then they, like was said earlier, they're paying, they feel they have the right to lash out on the sideline. And then going from that age level, that age group, up to junior high, JV, high school, it just keeps carrying over and keeps getting worse. And more people, more and more parents are jumping on board with the verbal abuse, which it's just not right. You know, it's kind of ruining the game in some aspects.
And it's tougher to stop it in travel than it would be in a school situation. I mean, school situations are bad enough, but the travel situation, Rob, is it as easy as minimizing proximity to the field to get a start at that? Because it's been brought up 3 times now about how close people are to the field. Does that make a big difference, do you think?
I think it does, but you know, as somebody that's gone through the travel circuit, really the last 10 years, you know, my daughter played all the way through. She's now at the University of Notre Dame playing lacrosse. My son's on his way to Colby. He played all the way through. And it is the proximity, but I also think what there isn't is what you guys referred to earlier. You don't have any kind of leadership, any kind of security that you see at the interscholastic level. It's a free-for-all. And it really becomes, it was very evident to me at a very, very early stage. I think my daughter was in 4th grade when I really first saw it, was how intense the parents have become, you know, for every tournament, every game. And you talk about these young referees coming up that's starting out, say at the JV level, they're also going out and reffing these games, you know, during, you know, their summertime, so to speak, at these travel tournaments. So, you know, I don't want to necessarily call it a beatdown, but it is a beatdown. They take a significant amount of abuse from the parents, proximity being one of them, also not being any kind of security or leadership to try to, you know, squelch what's going on the sidelines.
So,
And Jim, I just
Go
want
ahead,
to say
Marty.
something
Go.
real quick.
go ahead.
Just to piggyback on the travel thing. The other thing I'll say is I personally, I've been reffing lacrosse for 20 years. I don't do travel tournaments unless an assigner calls me and says, I'm really in a jam. Can you help me out? And the reason for that is I just don't have the time to deal with that chaos. Real quick, I will tell you this. I've had the pleasure of officiating Matt Lauria's games at Walt Whitman. Him and his staff are complete professionals. I've never had an issue. It's a joy to do them. But to go back to the travel, what I also find though, and I can tell you this from other officials, you know, a lot of officials that are very good officials, they have a different demeanor at travel games than they do at Section 11 games in Suffolk County. I know myself, I've gotten a lot better. I'm sure Coach Lauria can attest to this. I've gotten a lot better personally at addressing conflict, whether it be with coaches. I never ever address conflict, or I never even acknowledge parents. But I've gotten better as I've gotten matured. 20 years ago, I probably did not do nearly as good of a job. And a lot of officials, I think, take that attitude when they do travel. If some guy is screaming or whatnot, I think they're more apt to get nasty or go back at them because there's no security and there's no ratings involved, you know, for movement with officials. So, you know, there is a mentality there with officials that's different than the school setting.
And
So-
plus
Go ahead, Matt.
these officials are working in 90 to 100-degree heat all day long, 7 games a day, just getting verbally abused, that you don't blame them for, you know, going back every now and then. It's a tough job. It is, what you guys do is very difficult. So,
Mark,
Yeah.
you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I too am a lacrosse official, and I have done the tournaments in the past, and I've tended now to kind of step away for the exact reasons that Marty had given. But, you know, it's like Coach Lauria said, you show up and you have a schedule set for the day for 7 games. And what Marty brought up last week, how can you be the same official in the 7th game as you were in the 1st game? And what tends to be the real problem there is the 7th game of the day is the semifinals of the finals. So now you have the highest rated game, and the official may be the best in the world, but I'm telling you what, we're going to be tired. And when you show up at a tournament, we're walking on the field, the parents are there ahead of us, we're sitting practicing for an hour, and going back to proximity, their chairs are on the touch lines all the way around the field. Am I lying, Coach? I mean, we step on and I have to have people move back so a kid can throw the ball in from out of bounds. They're on top of you, and it's like, you we said earlier that they want their child to be successful, but their child can't make a mistake. So it's got to be the official's fault. So the issues that I have, and I call 1 second, if I'm having noise in the game, and we all have it, I'll just go directly to the coach. And I'll just say, listen, I need your help today. You're in control of your sideline. You're in charge. You're the king of the castle. Get everybody in control, or we're going to stop the game. And as soon as you say that, the coach takes control at that moment, turns to his parents, say, that's enough. And we finish the game without incident. But what has to happen is the official needs to have the nerve to be able to go to the coach and ask him for help. And you know what? The coaches want the kids to play. And 99% of the time, the coaches don't want to have the argument. And what people don't realize is, as officials, we don't want to make a mistake. We don't want to have the discussion. We don't want to. The best compliment I ever got as a football official is when I left the field and the coach says to me, I didn't even know you were here today.
Yep.
That's the best thing somebody can say to me. We don't want to have any interaction. And like what Marty said, never address a parent. That can only go sideways.
And the other thing I would just say, Jim, real quick, is if I have a conflict at a varsity lacrosse game, I will try to go to field management. I will try not to go to the coach first.
Sure.
They've got a hard enough job. I don't want any conflict between a coach and a parent. I'm sure it wouldn't be there first. So I try to go to either security, or if an athletic director is on the sidelines, and address it with them. My last resort would be go to the coach. A, their mind is probably on the game. And then again, B, I'm not trying to cause any other conflict with one of your players' parents.
See, the scary thing, if you have to go to field manager at that point, that means that the field managers aren't doing their job.
Exactly. And, to what Marty's saying is I was specifically talking about at a tournament. At school games, obviously, you're going to go to.
Same thing at school game, whether it's a tournament or it doesn't matter. If there's stuff going on and nobody's paying attention to it, they're hoping it goes away.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Carl, did you want to say something?
Yeah, getting back, to travel, and we all know it's very expensive to go on a travel team. Parents pay good money. They want their child to play. Child may not get into a game. Frustrations take its course on the parent, right? But what I've seen through the years is that, when my kids played, they played multiple sports all across. They didn't, if they played soccer, they played soccer in the fall or spring, whatever, and lacrosse or football, right? But now I think these kids are being driven to focus on one entity, right? And the parents sometimes are the problem, where they're living the dreams of themselves through the child, right? To make that kid number one. And there's nothing wrong with that.
There's a lot of issues out there why kids gravitate to one sport. It's Matt, where I'm going to go mad about how long a lacrosse season is. How long a baseball season is now, how long a soccer season is now. And the pressure to play at that level, if you want to play at that level, means you have to give something up, regardless of any statistics that we throw out there about multi-sport athletes. Rob, your kids played 2-3 sports.
Yeah, both my kids played 2 sports throughout high school. They played 3 up until high school basketball.
And it made a difference. So we're beating a good dead horse here now, pretty good. I want to just go back to Dave for a second with the NFL. And Dave, it's you're not having trouble getting officials. I mean, I was at a conference in North Carolina. I keep bringing that one up, where I met with the official assigners down there for high school. And you've got big ACC schools down there. You got NC State, you got Clemson, you got North Carolina, you got Duke, all these huge schools. And they're saying they're not getting enough officials to backfill either from the high schools, because they're all quitting too. So is the NFL in any kind of partnership right now with high school associations, like the New York State Public High School Association? Is that something that's in their queue?
I think our partnership efforts are probably with college conferences, right? That's the next level for us, to make sure that they're building out their pipeline, both from just the numbers and getting good quality officials, and obviously from a DE&I effort to make sure we're getting a diverse pool of officials. And then, look, we have our officials who work a lot of clinics throughout the country, our NFL officials who go around and they'll work high school and college, and they're trying to push these efforts. But as far as the National Football League building out like high school officiating, I mean, that's part of the reason why I'm on here. Part of it is I want to hear what you guys have to say. I want to see where our problems are and if there's some solutions. And it may be, just to give you an example, a PSA from the NFL or a public service announcement from some of your big college conferences about sportsmanship and about the way officials are being treated. Maybe it's not the end all be all, but maybe it's a little bit of an effort to get people to think about those sportsmanship things you guys were talking about.
Well, Dave, I mean, real quick, I mean, it's in the headlines. One of your former players, unfortunately, was involved in, an incident that resulted, unfortunately, in the death of a Little League football coach. But it's not just, we touched on this last week, and I say this all the time. It's getting harder to ref, and I'm sure Coach Lauria can agree with this. It is getting harder to coach at every single level in the United States as well. And so those are, I mean, it's a tragedy what happened to that poor man. And it's insanity that it was like an 8-year-old football game that happened at.
And one thing I mentioned to Jim before, I went to this NASO conference about a week and a half ago, and I could be wrong on this statistic, but I think somebody said there's an assault of an official, whether you're talking about a youth sports, high school, I swear somebody said every day. And when I heard that, and Marty, to your point, I don't know what assault means. I'm an attorney by trade. So does that mean a physical assault, putting hands on somebody? And I think the answer that somebody gave me was, that's not just people yelling at an official.
Right.
We get that every day. It is somebody putting their hands on me, or at least threatening to put, and that scared me. That's why I want to get more involved, because that statistic blew me away.
See, it's funny, you talk about marketing the position of the NFL. I'd almost love to see something similar to what we did with Play 60. Develop a marketing program just like Play 60 that trickled all the way down to elementary and kindergarten in as far as educators go. And not that you have to give us product, because that was what it was, right? A grant for Play 60. Right. But the PSA message, if it continues to go forward to parents, it's going to be you go on YouTube. That's the problem too, is social media. Social media, if something bad happens, somebody's videoing it, you see an umpire, and now you can't dislike a video on YouTube anymore. You can, but nobody sees the amount of dislikes because somebody got a little personally offended, I guess, by the dislikes. So you don't see that, and now all you see is the negatives. And I could probably get 100 of them tomorrow that are on YouTube about an umpire, a baseball official, softball umpire, football official getting assaulted. I'm starting to see Todd, what are your thoughts about that with some with the NFL?
Well, I appreciate everybody's comments. I think they're very valid. My thing is, we can do PSAs and we can do all those things, but in my opinion, we need to start holding people accountable. Mm-hmm. And we need to hold people accountable for their behavior. And if they're not going to behave and meet our expectations that we have, then there needs to be an consequence to that. And that's what we talked about at our July meeting in the Central Committee. It's been talked about probably for the last 2 years, but I think it's finally got to the point where we need to take some action. And not only do we need to hold our parents and our spectators accountable for their behavior, we need to hold our schools accountable for what they're doing. If they're not having proper supervision at a game, and those people that are there to be and are being paid to supervise, and they're not doing their job, we need to hold the schools accountable. They are members of our association. And as a member, they're expected to meet our expectations and our beliefs and our philosophies. And one of them is that, we expect good behavior at our interscholastic contest. And we have to do it if we want to make sure that we have officials, because if we don't have officials, then we are going to have games canceled, which we're already having right now, and we're not going to have interscholastic athletics. And that'd be a tragedy, because of, we have the ability to address that issue.
I'm glad you circled back into that, Todd, because I was definitely going to go back to that point. Mark, you kept throwing your hand up. What do you want to say?
Mr. Nelson hit the nail right on the head with a sledgehammer. I'm the assigner and the vice president of operations for Suffolk County PAL football. And to go right back to what he said about accountability and responsibility, this is what we've done for this year, and everybody has bought in. If a coach gets one flag, he's ejected for that game and suspended for the next. But what goes with that is a $500 fine to the organization that he volunteers for. So they would now have to supersede into the problem and correct him, or they're going to get rid of him. Then we go one step further with the parent. The parent's connected to the coach on the sideline. If the coach is working diligently to calm that parent down, he's a money. He's good. He's all right. If he lets it go on and stands by as a spectator, he's going to get ejected, and that will also carry the fine. And let me tell you what, when we've made this presentation to the Suffolk County PAL football organizations, they all bought in 100% with the comment, it's about time we did something about this.
But it's usually, we usually don't put up lights at intersections until somebody gets hit by a car. That's usually the way it goes in life, unfortunately. So Rob, you heard what Todd had to say about what should be done, and you've been a spectator for a long time at a lot of games. Is that the problem, that the security just isn't doing their job at a school? And let's hit the ADs between the eyes, because I know Matt and I know real well, how that goes sometimes.
Well, I'll tell you, from a interscholastic standpoint, I will have to say that, and I'm just going to use this past year as an example. And this is kudos actually to your former employer, Jim, and Matt, where you're coaching. I had an opportunity to go to a playoff game that was hosted at Walt Whitman. They did an outstanding job there because Huntington had problems with their gym from a flood. And, you had two teams in. They did a great job, that being the security, as you were calling them, field managers or the supervisors that were there. Even on the lacrosse side this year, I went through my son's senior year. I thought home and away, things were done very well. One of the gentlemen that spoke earlier said, I think some of the problems is, are they staffing enough at some of these situations? So I think where we've seen some challenges in the past where there wasn't enough, supervisors on hand to address the fans, in the stands, the parents in particular, that might be the only thing. But I have to say, this past year, more than years past, I thought that Suffolk County Conference 1 did a really, really nice job.
That's nice to hear. And it's staffing is a real big issue. One of the things that I brought it up last week when we talked, when I had to staff a game, sometimes you run out of people, and people not wanting to work just for the reason is they don't want to have confrontations with parents. That's really the bottom line and that's the most difficult thing here. There's trouble getting bus drivers, trouble getting custodians, trouble getting officials, and trouble getting security staff. So we have all these problems to get things. But again, when you've seen security, Rob, and I'm going to go back, is security in the stands with you? Are they outside the stands? Are they roaming around? Where are they usually?
That's a great point. I think it depends upon the school. I've seen firsthand in our district where sometimes they're not as visible. It's, they're kind of off to the side. I've been at other places where, they're actually walking through the stands, at a basketball game, they're visible, at the court level, and they're looking up. That's the other thing that I noticed in a number of places this past year, where there was more attention to not the game per se, but to what was going on in the stands, where you actually saw security. And I think there are times where I've seen just the opposite, where they're just watching the ball game and they're not engaged at all with the fans or with what's going on, student section, as they can get rowdy in certain areas. But that's a fair point, because I think, if you're having trouble and if they're not engaged the way they should be from a supervisor standpoint, that's going to be cause of an issue.
Good point there. Todd, you brought up penalties for those people that are, not doing it. Penalties also to the school. What would be a penalty in the cases that you're talking about? I know.
Our sportsmanship committee has made a recommendation to our governing body that if a spectator is disqualified or asked to leave a game, that they have a school would have two choices. That number one, they would either suspend that spectator for the next regularly scheduled game, whether it was home or away, or the parent would have to take the parent credential course offered by the National Federation of High Schools. It's about a 1-hour course about the expectations that schools have for spectators, and what their role is, and they would be able to print off a certificate after completion of that, and they would have to hand that certificate into the athletic director's office prior to being able to come back. That's the recommendation that is on the table right now. We have many sections, 8 and 11 in particular, that are currently just having parents or spectators sit out if they're asked to leave a game this past year. So we didn't want to ruin what has been successful for them down there. But I also believe that as an educational institution, it's our responsibility to educate not just our student athletes, but our coaches and our spectators and what the expectations are. So that's why the piece about the NFHS parent credential course was added into the possible consequence for negative behavior.
I hear you. And what about, you said something about a possible school penalty?
Well,
what could that possibly be?
What we're talking about is, as a member of our association that your school voluntarily chooses to be a member of, there are certain expectations.
Right.
And if you're not going to meet our expectations, you're not going to staff events properly, and you're not going to address negative behavior, and it's going to have a negative consequence not only on the officials but the teams that you're competing against, then you're putting your membership in jeopardy. And if you're not going to be a member in good standing, then you might not be a member of the association, or you might be suspended for a period of time.
Great thought, Dave.
This is probably extreme, but one of the things that was brought up at this conference in Denver was talk about accountability and all the things you folks have just mentioned. Somebody mentioned, do we take the athlete and suspend the athlete for something that their parents might have done? And I have both my kids played high school sports, and one is playing high school sports. I don't know if that's fair for the young man or woman, but that seems very extreme to me. I just want to see what your thoughts are, and if anybody's actually discussed that.
I would be completely against that. I think that's excessive.
As an official.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
If I could say one thing on that, just one thing on that,
Sure.
COVID was awful to all of our society, in particular high school, and in particular high school athletics. But the one thing that COVID showed us is we do not need spectators at our interscholastic athletic events in order to hold them.
We brought that up last week.
Need to understand that we don't need the spectators. It is a privilege to come and cheer your team on and to witness the athletic contest that's going on, but you need to hold the individuals that are behaving badly accountable, and to hold a student athlete accountable for what their parents are doing. I would be dead set against it. And I don't think
It seems so unfair.
very few
It really
people
does.
in our association would be in support of that.
Dave, going back to what you just said, the poor student athlete is embarrassed enough by having to watch their parents act the way they do. That's more than punishment than they deserve.
I agree.
What Mr. Nelson said was last week, both Marty, myself, and Carl all agreed that the refereeing or officiating a basketball game when the students came back without the parents was the greatest moments for varsity officials, because we went on the floor, we did our job and went home, and there was no noise except the kids having a good time. So like you said, it is a privilege. It's not a rite of passage.
So sitting
Go
here.
ahead, Carl.
Yeah, we're all talking, and the key point is education, right? How do we educate the parents? They
That's
read
where I
the
was going,
newspaper, they read the paper about the individual getting shot, killed, unfortunately, right? They go to a game, they see an official, right? But I don't think the parents truly understand how they impact, right, the lack of officials, right? I bet you if you ask one or two parents besides Rob, right, they wouldn't know what we're going through, right? They would just come to a game, they leave, and they go home.
So
I think we have to get that point across, educating them during the like, I think the high schools have that session with the coaches and, I mean, coaches, parents and the players. Bring an official in. Tell them what we're going through.
Carl, you just hit the exact nail I was going to go to. We've hit the nail on the head a couple of times today. Exactly where I was going to go to, because it seemed to me that the communication is lost from officials to coaches. Yes, the officials do talk to the coaches. The coaches then talk to the AD, perhaps, because the ADs don't go to that officials meeting. They with the coaches, only the chair shows up. So for lacrosse, Tim Mullins will show up for that, and for football, Tim Moran will show up for that. But does that AD get that message to all the ADs? No, there's no avenue for that. But if the official is there with the coach, with the parents, with the AD at a meeting, that makes a huge difference, because then the game of telephone is gone. The message is the same message going all the way through, and then reinforced as the coach affirms it, as the AD affirms it, and you get final affirmation from parents. So that's maybe the way to go. And it's something as simple as sending one guy to a meeting.
Right.
And it doesn't matter who it is. Any official can go to any coaches or parent meeting.
100% agree with that. Actually, James, tomorrow night, Carl and I will be on the Suffolk County Football Coaches annual meeting to actually give our input. And Tim Moran actually said to us, because we're going to have he said every high school coach should be on, and every AD should be on, for us to get our time in and discuss exactly what we're talking about here as a group, to the Coaches Association, their executive board. And I think that this process is starting. I guess they're hearing it come down the pipe.
But you're missing the one guy that needs to be there. The guy that's in the middle of the screen right now is the parent. The parent's not, we're all gonna sit there and say, you're right, Carl. As an AD, I'm going to sit there and say, you're absolutely right, Carl. Matt's going to sit there as a coach and say, you're absolutely right. Todd Nelson's going to say, great job. You guys are telling us what we need to do. As soon as we get to the parents who maybe show up to a meeting, and maybe they don't show up to that parent meeting. And then the message is, let's just get the season started. I want to watch my kid play. I don't really care that there's no officials, so they have to hear it from you directly. And that's where we have to join forces somehow. And I don't know how we're going to do it. Is it just keep doing social media promotions? Is it still to have me? But I think physically there has to be some kind of physical verbal contact. And maybe I'm wrong. Does anybody want to comment on that? And
Jimmy, I'd like to make a comment. Listening to what you guys are saying, something that kind of came to mind. I work in the healthcare field, and, we're bombarded with compliance requirements. And one thing that I took away from the pandemic was when we had limited fans in the stands, you had to actually have an ID badge. Now, I know this is extreme, but as we're hearing this and, you're throwing solutions out there. So this might be on the extreme side, but, would it ever be considered to, from a district perspective, for a parent of a student athlete, require them to take a compliance course on how to behave, basically, and then you be issued your parent pass to go. I know it's extreme, but as I'm hearing things and I'm looking back on, you take little silver linings out of the pandemic and bring them forward. Is that potentially an option, to get folks to be more engaged, to make that a requirement from a district perspective of the parents of the student athletes?
Todd, what do you think of that? Star 7.
I'm sorry, Jim. I was muted.
Okay.
The sportsmanship committee did discuss that, but they didn't. That's almost like penalizing the parents that are doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's why they wanted to use that parent credential piece for individuals that needed education on what the expectations are. Because to be honest with you, I think a majority of our parents understand what the expectations are, understand what they are there for, and they're there to support their son or daughter. One of the things that our schools struggle with is what is acceptable in terms of behavior, in terms of, everybody can say, obviously the shooting, that's the extreme, but even any assault or anything like that. But what the sportsmanship committee talked about was, when an official makes this mistake, just like coaches, just like athletes make mistakes. You know, when everybody says, "Ooh, you missed that one," or something like that, and there's a collective reaction to whatever the call may be, that's expected. You know, officials understand that. But when you stand up and purposely make yourself stand out from everybody else because you're yelling or you're screaming or what you say, and people have to turn their head and look at you, that's what needs to be addressed. If you're going to make a spectacle and bring all that attention to yourself because of what you're saying, that is what needs to be addressed. And those are the people that need to be further educated, in our opinion.
That's
Here's what, and go ahead, Mark.
a great point, Mr. Nelson, because I do know that part of our unsporting act violations in football is to bring undue attention to yourself, which brings upon a flag. So you're right on the same track of that with the parent. You're bringing undue attention to yourself. You're taking away from the game, and you're making a mockery of it. You need to learn what etiquette is about in sports arenas.
Now, I'm going to change the flow just a little bit.
Yeah, please.
Take it from the parent to the coach.
All right, Matt's turn.
Okay. I mean, as officials, we've all seen coaches, right, that just lose it, right? Close game, bad call, right? But they do lose it. Some of them more than others, right? And Mark made a great point in our last session that players take on the persona of the coach. And as an official, now you're facing the child, the player, and the coach, because the player is going to be on the field and he's going to be trash talking you. And that's when the flags fly. And I think from the coaches have to be held accountable, right, for their actions. I think even more than the parents.
I completely agree with that. And I was going to touch on that a little bit later, but it all stems from the coach. It is the head coach's program. So the parents are part of your program. So I feel that the open communication between, or the relationships between not only your players, but with your parents is going to be key to the way they act and conduct themselves on the sideline. Because not only they may come to a game and feel free to say whatever they want, but when they know they're also hurting the coach who is in charge of their son, I think that adds a whole nother dynamic to the way they'll act. But I do take responsibility as a coach of everybody involved in the program, and do think it is our responsibility to get a hold of parents, coaches, staff, and have an open line of communication with them and relationships with them. I think that has gone tremendously. That has elevated the whole program that I've been trying to build at Walt Whitman, is having that open line of communication, having the parent meeting in the beginning where we discuss our code of conduct, we discuss how we should represent our program, our team on and off the field. And so, yes, Carl, I am 100% in agreement that it definitely is a big responsibility of the coaches.
Matt, that's not a mandatory meeting, is it? That's something you came up with as a coach with some experience? Parent meeting?
It is. It was always, Dr. Wright always stressed it to us to have a parent meeting. Some coaches tend to have them a little bit more in depth. Some are just a brief, here's what we're doing, here's our schedule, I'll see you later. And then some coaches take it serious. And I found that taking it more serious has not only made my life easier, but made everybody's life easier that's involved. Because when you lay everything out that you expect of everybody that's involved, everybody they see what they need to do. They see how they need to conduct themselves. They see where help is needed on and off the field. So it's one cohesive group, and it's been a tremendous impact for our program.
And that kind of speaks it to when I dealt with all the coaches, 82 of them, 102 of them for 82 teams. And dealing with a coach, when Matt was a young coach, he needed a little more hand-holding, than which all young coaches do. They need a little more. You need to do a little more of this. But I would rather see a young coach go out there and make a mistake that's correctable that's something we can talk about so that they can self-actualize what they did. The veteran coaches sometimes forget and they take it for granted, that nothing's going to happen to them. But Matt just explained, this is a consistent work in progress, and any AD that listens to this today needs to still talk to all their coaches, whether they're veterans or not, on the importance of this kind of communication, because it has gotten worse. I don't want to, again, keep beating up the parent thing. One thing we did talk about was, the officials feeling safe when they come to a game. So we get back into that security aspect, that security needs to be present and in place in order for the officials to feel safe. And I keep, my mind keeps going back to the NFL again. I have all these dreams of the NFL with a great 10-minute video that we can show to parents. I know the NFHS has one, Todd, but I just feel like another 5 minutes, even if it was 5 minutes long, something along those lines, where people are going to sit there, or whether it came from, whether Miles Jones did a video on the importance of having officials, because one of the more recognizable lacrosse players in the world is Miles Jones. Do we start going there? Because who the hell knows Jim Wright, except for a few of you guys, Mark, Marty, Matt, Todd, a few of us know each other, Dave, but we need a name. Okay. Yeah. Maya Chaka spoke at our conference this year, Dave, one of two female officials in the NFL. And she said the struggles she had were of a different nature coming up through the ranks as a female, and she took her abuse more from the officials she worked with than she did from the fans and the spectators and everything. But, do we need to go there? I mean, we know a lot of people, guys. Can we go there? Can we get something there that gives us some credibility in our talk to parents?
I think it's a great idea. I think it was also touched on earlier, having the officials, like Marty, I don't know if you would be open to this, but you putting together a little video for us to show at the parent meeting. And now it's coming from the officials' perspective. Something as far as that, I think, would go a very long way, just hearing from somebody outside of the program.
Well, I'll tell you what, Matt, Carl and I, as soon as we hang up on this call, we're going to be working right on that video.
Yeah.
If they
And
hear,
instead of showing up to all the meetings, every coach should have access to the video and start there.
and you know what, it wouldn't be beyond Section 11 to take those videos and put them right up on their website, because they did it for recruiting officials. I could see them buying right into this. Just at the end of the day, we're talking about all this stuff, but they're pulling their hair out trying to get these games covered. So this thing is not just with us; it's all the way up the lane, all the way up the ladder.
And a video like that, I'm sorry, Carl, and a video like that should also include a parent.
Right.
Yeah.
Jimmy, I was going to say to parent, and I would even go so far as even to say, could you even bring in a student athlete? Because I did see this year firsthand, especially at the middle school level, most of those games, and specifically for girls lacrosse, did not have referees. So if you were to do some kind of a public service announcement, through Section 11 or through your respective districts, to incorporate a parent, a coach, or even like a young student athlete to say, listen, these games mean a lot to us. How you behave has an impact, and not having referees takes it away from us. And at the end of the day, it's about them.
Now, Todd,
I love that.
Todd, from a state perspective, right? Could you standardize something like that across the state, right? Create one film that touches on all the points we said today and pass it out. This way, everybody's getting the same message.
Good point, Carl.
Yeah, we would definitely be in favor of that. Obviously we have a good sized budget. One of the things that I wanted to do this year was to put a big poster board. We did this with sportsmanship a few years ago, and give it to every one of our member schools about, be respectful to the officials today, and then also on the bottom of that have a QR code that said, if you're interested in becoming official, scan this QR code and get the process started. But, we're open to any ideas. Like I said, this is part of our 5-year strategic plan. We need to recruit more officials, but more importantly, I think we need to retain more officials. And really, that's the responsibility of our member schools, in my opinion. So, if that's something our membership would like to have, then we would definitely put that together. We have a great videographer that we use for our Hall of Fame banquets that could definitely put a great PSA together. We have access to the NFHS as well. So definitely that would be something we would be interested if that's what our membership wanted.
And
I
Dave,
love that idea, especially with Rob's point about adding the student athlete to it.
right. And
You
Dave,
know?
what about taking that video and putting it during a Jet game on the screen? They're always playing stuff,
There you
right?
go, Dave.
You need officials,
They're always looking for content in game. It would probably be a great idea. Yep.
I think 80,000 people sitting in Giant Stadium that are all referees, as we well know. Listening to something like that, but because again, when you see things like youth games being played at halftime, I mean, granted, there's no officials really; it's the coaches just managing the game. But just seeing the kids out there playing like that and see that that's the most important piece of this. It's the kids need to play. We said this last week. It's kids first.
Right.
It's not coaches. It's not NYSPHSAA. It's not it's kids first, and the kids are losing on a lot of levels because we're so mad at each other right now. We're just angry with each other and pointing fingers, and the finger point, like I said in the email, guys, finger pointing is over. It's time for action. It's time to get things done. And we've been going for about an hour now. I think we could probably take it another hour if we needed to, but I think we got the point across about where we wanted to focus on, which was the number one thing was dealing with parents and dealing with spectators and dealing with coaches. That's the number one. As far as rating cards, safety, things like that, that's the athletic director. We can have a separate conversation about that, and we will once I can get some athletic directors to come on, because they're not as busy as they are preparing for their seasons right now. You don't need an old retired guy like me talking it up so much. But I want to just leave now, if you guys are okay with that, we'll go around the room and just give us a little closing statement, and then we'll call it quits. Mark, you got your hand up all the time, Mark. You always got your hand up. I want to make sure I get you.
I just want to say thank you, everybody, for your time. All your insight was, beyond valuable to hear it from every perspective. But I also want to tell Dave that I don't know if you're aware of this, that Dominic Pender, one of your NFL officials, came to a Suffolk County football officials meeting and gave an hour presentation on mechanics and such. And it went over like it was like Christmas time for us as officials. And now that I have you on the screen, it's something I really would like, and Carl would like to be able to develop, that maybe we can get an annual type of conference where your guys can come in. It's a different game for us. I mean, there's only 5 of us and there's 9 of you. But at the same time, mechanics is mechanics. It teaches us where to be, how to make a call, when to make a call, what to look for. To come from that level down to our level to make us better, maybe that helps correct some of the issues that we're dealing with on the field. So again, kudos to Dominic. He did that on his own. He came out, gave his own time. There was no finance involved. He just was a pleasure to him to be able to do that. And I'd like to reach out to the NFL. Maybe we can take this to the next level.
I will say about Dominic, so just an example, right? He's one of our young officials, meaning he's only been in the league for a year or 2, maybe 3. I promise you, what he probably did prepping for that and spending that hour with your officials, I guarantee you that made him better. I promise you that. So we need to do more of that.
It's a win-win for everybody. So,
yeah.
Again, we were blessed. Carl, you can chime in right there. You were there with me that night.
Right. From an education perspective, right? We know we're going to educate the parents maybe through video, but as officials, we need to educate our officials, right? How to communicate better with the coaches, right? Because we have thick-skinned guys and we have the new guys. We need to instruct them how to approach an official. They read about it, but we have to do a better job. And just from my ending point, we're a team, right? Now we're growing. There are 3 of us. Now there's 7 of us on the call, right? And there's no I in team. So let's keep this going so we can really do something for officiating.
That's great words, Cole. Thank you. Dave, you want to continue with some points?
I just, for me, and again, I never officiated, unfortunately, and I regret that. And I'm 52. It may happen. Maybe I'll get a chance to. But I would say this to all of you and anybody who listens to this. Are there barriers other than what we just spent the last hour and 15 minutes? The parent, the conduct of whomever, is that the biggest barrier to either recruiting or retaining officials? And are there other barriers that you guys can think of? For example, I'm just giving you an example. The way our youth and I think about my son who's 20, my daughter who's 17, can they crack open a rule book? I mean, I pour through the NFL rule book, and folks, everybody complains to me that we got to simplify it. And then every year some nuance comes up and we end up adding to it. Are the rules tests, the rule books? Do we have visual learners that need more video? All those things. And I'm more than happy to get involved in helping you guys out. But are there other barriers that you guys think of that are impacting retention and recruitment?
Dave, I would say where we live, fortunately, I think as a high school official, I think we get paid well. So I don't think pay for us is an issue. Maybe other parts of the country. I know some buddies of mine that I played college football with that are reffing football down in Georgia, and they don't get paid nearly as much as I do. And quite frankly, have to travel more. So for us, I wouldn't say pay. The number one issue is the, for lack of a word, abuse or just the intensity of the conflict. And the only other thing that comes up is guys don't have time. They want to do it and they look into it, but they just physically don't have the time. And I don't think there's much of a way to overcome that right now. But so that's just some things. But thank you.
I will pledge this to you guys. I'll be your biggest recruiter from here on out. I made that pledge to the NASO folks. So I may not make much of a difference, but I'm going to keep trying. Anybody I meet, you realize in this position I do a lot of like sports management programs at colleges, people that are passionate about sports and don't know what they want to do in their careers, right? They don't know what they may want to be an agent. They want to go to marketing. And I have an opportunity maybe to speak to 100 students at a time. And I'm going to talk about officiating. If you have that passion and you're not sure what to do with your time or volunteer time, or if the marketing gig, that pathway doesn't work out and you really care about your sport, hey, you should direct your attention to officiating. I mean, those are little things, but if I can help at all, that's what I'm gonna try to do.
I appreciate that, Dave. And you brought up the thing about pay. Marty, I don't know if I brought this up last week, that when the survey was done in North Carolina, that was the number 5 or 6 problem, was the pay. Just so you know, it's really, there's people like you said, Marty, they don't get paid well in certain parts of the country, but to them, they do it because they love it. And now they're not loving it. And that's one of the issues. So, but thanks for bringing that up. And Dave, thanks for your support. Carl?
Yeah, getting back to Marty's point about time, right? You have the junior high game starting at 3:30, 4 o'clock, right? And it's very difficult for individuals to leave their jobs now at 3:30, 4 o'clock, given the constraints of who's remote, who's on site, right? So there are a lot of restrictions there, right? And I think the other part is maybe helping the sections helping with the scheduling to take some of those junior high games and start them later, right? But again, brings up security costs.
We went through this with COVID, with busing, where the games were starting later, and it caused us a myriad of problems. But we're going to make that another conversation, though, that's for sure. Todd, do you want to close out?
I just like to say that once I said it at the beginning, that we're in a critical state right now when it comes to our officials, and it's going to take a team effort. It's going to take the officials, the coaches, the schools, the state association, the sections, all working together to try to get us through this critical stage that we are in. And I do appreciate everybody's comments today. I think they were very insightful. I think they're going to be very valid in us moving forward. And we just got to keep working together, and we got to hold people accountable. That's my big thing, is holding people accountable for their actions and their behaviors, whether it's lack of action or whether it's bad behavior. So I appreciate you. And if we don't have officials, we're not going to have interscholastic athletics. And that would be a shame, and shame on all the adults that are involved in it. Thank you.
You're right, Todd. Without officials, it's just recess. You know, that's the mantra. Matty Lauria, what do you got?
Like everybody said, like Carl and Todd said, it is a team effort. And we have to keep in the back of our heads that it is, like you always say, Doc, it is the kids first. And we always have to keep them in mind, that it's about the kids and to keep them continuously playing. So
Good job, Matt. I appreciate you. And I
thanks,
figured
thanks for having me on.
Hey, I appreciate you, man. And I figured since he took the most abuse today, everyone is the representative for every parent in the country.
No,
Rob, I'm going to give you the last word.
Yes. Well, first and foremost, thanks for having me. This was actually great. And it was awesome to be a part of this kind of discussion with the folks that are on here. So first and foremost, thank all of you, because you guys are looking to take the next steps to make things better for the student athlete. Probably my biggest takeaway from this, and it was really as a result of the conversation, was how interconnected every one of the roles we discussed at length is today. When we talk about, school leadership, to the coaches, to the parent, to the athlete, and the word accountability kept coming up. And it's just something I think that, when you look at leadership at the individual schools, if they could set the tone down through the coaching staffs, whether it's those parent meetings, at the end of the day, that message will be received by the parent. And I think by highlighting it's about the student athlete, and to continue to do that, more parents will become self-aware of what they're doing when they're in those stands or on those sidelines.
Great words, Rob. And listen, I just want to end by saying thank you to everyone for coming on today. It was a real pleasure. We're going to do this again and again and again and again. And at some point, we're going to do it so we're actually celebrating, the too many officials. We have too many officials and they're not making enough money. It's because they're not working enough games because it's just too much. But again, thank you so much for giving up your time this afternoon and coming on. I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to close out with my little sayonara to the fans out there. I mean, if you're watching this video on YouTube, like and subscribe, please. Check out the other programs on the NYSPHSAA YouTube network. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at NYSPHSAA6. Thank you to Go Gipper for our backdrop here today. And I just wish everyone the best in all that they do. Thank you, officials, coaches, Todd, Dave, everybody that came on today. Good luck this year. We're going to be out there supporting you, of course. God bless you all. Sports fans, the AD Vantage Point signing off. Here it is, Wednesday, August 17th. We'll have this posted in a little bit. But thank you again, and you guys have a great night. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you.